This is Autoline Daily with John McElroy and Gary Vasilash, episode 586 for January 27th of 2022. Improvise, adapt, overcome. Why Robert Bollinger changed his EV strategy. Watch Autoline After Hours live at Autoline.tv every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 12 p.m. Pacific. You can subscribe to this podcast for free by searching for Autoline in iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.
Hey, Gary.
John, how are you?
I'm toasty warm, even though it is unbelievably cold outside.
It is. And just for those who are listening and are wondering, no, this is not Autoline Daily. This is Autoline After Hours. Sean did daily just a few hours ago. So
that's right. Okay, thanks for the correction. Yes.
Just to clarify, just people might be confused. But all right, speaking of confusion, there will be no confusion. No confusion here because you've been on a roll lately. Okay. So in 1994, on January 27th, a vehicle designed by one of your favorite designers, Camillo Pardo, went into production. Okay. And the second generation of the vehicle was designed by no less than Moray Callum. So I put to you, what was that vehicle?
It's got to be the Ford GT. Uh-oh, he stumped me. Really? Okay, what is it?
The Ford Windstar.
The Windstar?
The minivan.
You mean the minivan?
Mm-hmm.
Camillo did the Windstar?
That's what I've been able to determine.
I did not know that.
He may not know that either, but be that as it may. Yeah, imagine that.
Yeah, so, I never knew that. So you didn't stump me. I just didn't know.
So the vehicle had 3 generations, and then the last one was just so when the redesign was done in 98, they then just did a mid-cycle refresh and then just killed it. And
right.
So it's sort of interesting, though, that, I mean, if you think about it now with electric vehicles, I mean, and autonomous vehicles, minivans are the thing.
That's right. Yeah. It's the one box design.
Exactly right.
Or almost one box.
Yeah, close enough.
Something that Giugiaro predicted years ago. That's my favorite story. When I finally got to meet Giorgetto Giugiaro, I was like, all agog, and I said, "Oh my God, you know, 20 years ago, you predicted that the one box design was going to take over the industry, and you were so right." And he goes, "No, you're wrong. I said that 30 years ago."
All right. So let's get on with the show here. Yes. We got one of our friends, Greg Migliore, who is the editor-in-chief of Autoblog, to come back and talk with us. Greg,
hey everybody. Thanks for having me back. I would have totally gone.
Let's try that again with more emotion. Hey, Greg, how you doing?
I am super excited to be back. There we go. Maybe I need a Red Bull or an espresso or something. I'm kind of a mellow guy, kind of a cerebral guy, you know.
Well, that's great. Hey, let's bring in our special guest for today, Robert Bollinger, the head of the company that's got his own name on it. Robert, great to have you here again.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Good to see you.
So you heard my opening to the show, the title, to assess, adapt, overcome. A couple of years ago when we first had you on Autoline, you were working on coming out with these really cool, all electric, rare, very rugged, off-road capable electric SUVs. And you took them to auto shows and other places. They got all kinds of accolades. I mean, I couldn't believe the public reaction to it. All very positive. But now you're going, nah, we're not going to go that route. We're going to pivot and we're going commercial. So tell us, a little bit of the story there. Why did you go the way you did? What forced you to reassess? Why are you going the way you're going?
Yeah. So, if you know our story, right, it was a small group of us that created the first B1, the 2-door in upstate New York, right? And that's what we debuted in 2017. So it really was the first all-electric truck from the ground up. It was class 3 from day one, right? So we got, I think, upwards of like 50,000 reservations online before we announced the price point and all that kind of stuff. It's my baby. We moved to Detroit, made the 4-door versions of the B1 and the B2, the pickup version. Love them. They're dear to my heart. I'll keep them with us forever, right? But really over time, there's still a certain amount of work to be done on those trucks to bring into production. Ever since we showed our underneath chassis in 2019, I think it was, the chassis that was underneath those trucks, we kept getting more and more commercial interest. Can I put a delivery van on top of that, all that kind of stuff. So we started developing a commercial only platform side by side way back then. So really early 2020, we started developing the commercial version of that, because you don't want to all-wheel drive adjustable suspension chassis for your delivery van, right? So we were using all the class 3 knowledge we had, all the components, all the tier 1s we had developed stuff with, because a lot of it was transferable to the commercial, and we were just doing them side by side. And really it just came to a point where, the amount of funding and time needed to finish the B1 and B2 and bring it to production versus, 9 out of 10 conversations with us were about commercial. It was just the smart business decision to make, right? So
the market spoke.
The market spoke. And also with regulations coming, regulations will force fleets to go electric before, individual humans are forced to do it, So there's an awful lot of potential there. And it's not like we're chasing dollars. It's still, it was the right move for what we have to do. We have a small team. We vetted really great engineering firms that we work with very closely. So we work with a lot of tier 1s, a lot of engineering firms, and even with their help, how much money and time and people power it takes to get something on the road. So it was just the smart decision to concentrate on the all electric platforms, and then we're going to be developing some things that go on top of that later, if you will.
Robert, just to be clear, so the B1, B2 were not going to be directly competing with the likes of the Rivian or the Ford Lightning. It was a step above.
Right. Well, yeah, many steps above, I would say, but
I mean, in terms of functionality, we won't.
Right. I'm the CEO. I can say anything about it. Right? Yeah. No. The whole idea was that those trucks were designed and engineered from the ground up to not have any competition. It was just like, okay, in the future, when there's a Ford F-150 electric, a Tesla electric, and at the time, no one knew of Rivian was not called Rivian at that point, right? So, it was made on purpose to be a low volume, niche, crazy capable truck. So if you know what's in it, it's worth the 6-digit price point, right? And we pre-sold our first year of production. We were going to be 1,000 units a year. And so we found our market, and so you'd be like, well, then why'd you stop moving forward with it, right? If we have all these things lined up, but it still was a considerable amount of money needed to finish the development of it, because it is a very complex, very capable truck. And so, again, there's everyone coming in the door right now are fleets, upfitters, and the like, looking for, us to help them electrify their fleets. So we just made that decision.
So Robert, to dig a little deeper about the shift to the commercial side of things, I mean, these were essentially almost like luxury, vehicles, if you will, maybe not as far as accoutrements, but
Right.
Pricing and aspirational. And now you guys are going to focus primarily on the chassis, right? So just really dial into that, I take it.
Right.
You're not going to be doing any body work, is that correct?
We are developing something in-house for body, but it's right now, what we can develop at the same time as the 3, 4, 5, and 6, side by side, right? They obviously have differences to them. There might be a couple of different e-axles to them, but we've developed our own batteries in-house, so we're continuing to develop our batteries in a 700-volt commercial variation, right? So all of that internal work that we've been doing that's underneath these cool trucks that people liked continues on. So that's where all of our engineering is at. That's where most of our team works on, is all of the controls, thermal, battery management system, integrating our own components that have been made for us, off-the-shelf components and the like. So integrating all of that into the vehicle, all of that work that we've been doing over these past 4 years. I kind of see us as when we moved to Detroit in 2018, we started again as a new company then, right? Only 3 of us moved from New York here. And so we've been basically a company since 2018, and we've done a lot of work. We built those 4-door variations of our trucks. They all work. You're seeing online here. We took them out testing. And so all of that history continues. We always outsource the body work. We design these trucks in-house, but bringing them to production, we were using an outside engineering firm for that. That's more of a commodity, the body, right? But all the expertise and all of the electrical work that we've been doing that's what we all worked on internally. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but yeah, all of that transfers over to commercial, and we can continue doing exactly what we're doing. We're just kind of ramping it up and taking it across now 4 platforms for class 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Wow. Of course you can't do that in-house. I mean, there's a whole industry built around upfitting, right? And the variation is staggering, and you got specialists in different things. Here's my question to you, though. We keep hearing how hard it is to get chips, how hard it is to lock in battery supplies and the like. I know you're not in production yet, but what's going on from your vantage point along these shortages?
Right. Well, it's interesting because in our 3rd generation battery pack, and we're now in our 4th, but in our 3rd generation battery pack, we streamlined it and took out half of the circuit boards that we needed. So we already were streamlining our pack to bring down costs, bring down weight, bring down complexity, and make it easier to manufacture. So we were doing that already, regardless of chip shortages. And as far as our battery packs, we work on the module level. So our module, we're making our battery pack module agnostic and also chemistry agnostic. So our BMS, which we wrote in-house and we own ourselves, which is a big amount of money and time to do that.
Yeah, right.
That is chemistry agnostic and volt agnostic. So it could be 350 or 700 volt. And so we kind of laid the groundwork as we were developing it to de-risk it as much as possible, because as a small startup that hasn't been given billions of dollars yet from large companies, we had to de-risk everything, right? So we have to be kind of agnostic and be able to take, so we have a number of battery sources for our battery packs. So
and a follow-up then, battery companies keep bragging they're bringing the cost down. Are you seeing that happen?
They bring it down in the production quotes, yes. What you pay for prototype volume still is extremely high, obviously. So.
Robert, I think I want to go where Greg, I think, was going. And that is, okay, when you did the B1 and the B2, there was an aesthetic to the design of the vehicles that were completely phenomenal and distinctive, and nobody was in that space, right? What happens now to that?
Right. Well, thank you for saying that. I'm going to get all choked up about all this, but yeah, we've had people when we first debuted it or soon after say, we've done entire market studies of what's missing in the market, and you were right there, that you nailed it. And we just built this truck from what a small group of us wanted to be our dream truck, right? And then when I started the design of it, I was just like, what do I like? We basically just built a truck that we liked. And then that's when we had the debut of it in 2017. I was a nervous wreck, and you can tell in the video. I was a nervous wreck because I was like, we love this truck. I have no idea if anyone else is going to love it. There's a classic styling to it, of course. But yeah, it was just like, we threw all this crazy stuff together because we wanted to. Does anyone else like it? And then we found a lot of people do. One issue is that when you throw all this crazy stuff together, it becomes very expensive, right? So, and that showed in our price point. So, yeah, I appreciate that. That book, with us. There's some ideas of where we might take that truck later after we get, funding for the commercial side. We could always come back to it. We have let our depositors know, we're giving their deposits back right now. And just saying, hey, if this comes back, it'll be these trucks, because we were developing it for production as you see it. Minor changes like roll down windows, because the slide window started becoming a ceiling issue, right? So we were, and also people probably appreciate roll down more. So there were little changes like that, but yeah, I purposely made that truck to be anti-electric, right? That was the idea, was when you develop a vehicle now in electric, everybody is trying to go for this futuristic look. And the more futuristic you try to make something, the older it's going to look quicker, right? It's going to look outdated pretty soon. So I wanted to build a truck that would last forever. You would hand it down. And so I thought this aesthetic was the type that worked that way. I love flat. I love rivets. I always have. And I was like, what the hell? Let's do that. It makes it very hard to manufacture, right? That's a huge amount of cost in manufacturing. But again, as a niche hand assembled vehicle, that was the beauty of it. I just, there's old photos in factories of people with their hands on it. That's the whole aesthetic of the vehicle, and how it was going to be made and where it was going to be made and how it was going to be delivered. And the community was all tied in together, and it's paused for right now, but yeah.
To kind of follow up on that, like, how does this really changes, I'd say, almost like the mission for your company? You know, you go from the guys who are making like literally the truck for the LL Bean catalog, right, minus the golden retriever jumping out of it, right, to the commercial sector. So how do you like sort of change like your mission and just the ethos of who you guys are, right, to go that way? It's a major pivot.
Yeah. We were, I think, in our branding and the way we're coming across on purpose, you know, the way we were presenting ourselves was, this is very hands-on. It is us making this, right? We were always honest about where we were at. We're showing it on social media. We were never, you know, we never said the truck is going to be $40,000 and then later come out and say it's $125,000, right? We never lied or, you know, misrepresented ourselves. Not implying anyone else did. I'm just saying we were very honest about what we did. And so I think that is going to continue, right? We came right out. I had a video where I'm saying it right to the screen, like, hey, this is where we're at. This is what we're doing. It's the right business decision. And it's still going to be, you know, we're still a relatively small team. We are going more high tech in our approach. You know, it is all of that technology that's underneath. People loved our trucks because of the way they looked and the way they could perform, and they could see themselves in it out in Moab or on their farm. So it was a very emotional thing was our trucks, right? Now as commercial, it's almost the opposite. It's the other side of your brain, right? It's all that technology that's underneath, but it's still us making them and putting them together. So I don't know if that answers your question, but definitely we're highlighting the technology of what was underneath of everything we're doing. You know, even though we loved jumping in the trucks and going off-roading in them, all the technology underneath was developed by us in-house. And so we're just going to present that more up front.
So you got all these requests on the commercial side. Can you give us an idea of how that's going? I mean, do you have orders? Do you have commitments? Memorandums of understanding? Where do you stand from a business standpoint?
Yep, we have quite a number of LOIs and MOUs and all those kind of documents. We are getting into pilot programs with well-known fleets, the names that you would definitely recognize. All the fleets that we talk to, they know that their changeover to electrification is going to take time, right? Because you take just one of their depots for 100 trucks or 50 trucks, and they say, we want to electrify that building. By the time, you know, the utility comes out and upgrades their electricity, they change it over to, you know, electrical charging, you know, all of that's going to take a long time. They have to make their whole business plan as well. So our development time, their time to get into electrification, and then even our tier ones and the components they can supply to us for commercial are all in a similar time frame, right? So all of those fleets that are coming in now, we're signing up for the pilot program, and then they're giving us an indication of their initial ramp up in volumes. So we're at that stage with, I would say, you know, Frank, our commercial sales guy, is so good, and he'll just go on and on and on about all the, you know, the 20 or so fleets that we're in discussions with now. So he's very proud of his work. So, and what's interesting is that we're in that class 3 to 6. There's a ton of people in the class 1 and 2 trying to do the Ram ProMaster kind of electric delivery van for many reasons, right? A lot of it is for license, what kind of license your people can drive. And then there's a lot of names way up in the Class 8, of course. Tesla started that a long time ago. And so in between, there are fewer players in this segment. There's going to be ones coming along and adding to it, obviously. But right now, it's a good spot to be in. And it's using all the stuff that we've developed in Class 3. So even though those trucks were cool and badass and off-road, they were Class 3 trucks because I wanted them to carry 4,000 to 5,000 pounds because I wanted it for my farm, right? That's the original idea. So just starting at Class 3, it's not like we jumped the wall into some crazy thing. We're doing long-lasting, hardworking electric vehicles that can carry a lot of weight. And then we realized, if you add more leaf springs, maybe ramp up a little bit in one of your drivetrains, you can hit a lot more classes with that same amount of work. So onboard chargers or our battery development, all of that goes across all those platforms.
Robert, it'll come as a big surprise to John that I actually did some research and looked at some numbers. And so last year in the medium duty segment, there were 239,703 medium duty trucks sold in the United States. Okay. And that was an increase of 10.1% compared to 2020. You mentioned that, the competition isn't that great now, but when I look at the names that are in that space, okay, again, the medium duty space, it's Ford, Freightliner, International, Dodge, Isuzu, General Motors, Peterbilt, Kenworth, Mack, and Hino. Okay, now many of those have announced that they're going to be having electric vehicles. Many of them have electric vehicles. How does Bollinger play in this space?
Right. Well, our numbers are higher than that. What classes are you covering in your numbers? Just wondering. Is it 3 through 6 or 4 through?
I think it might be 4 through 7.
Okay. Yeah, our market study shows it's 469,000 vehicles were sold in 2019, I think it was. And then you take that plus that, it's going to be a larger number than that when, you say a percentage of that will go electric, but when they start to replace their vehicles, plus on top of what they already buy, it's kind of a larger number. But we believe that even if we are one of 5 players in that segment, and we can all live there. So I think that also the fleets that are coming to us who have talked to some of those names you've talked to, and they're also talking to us, and they're working with us, I believe that they see a potential for there being more than one player in that area. So maybe they want to diversify their fleet and buy from more than one company, if you will. And so I think some of those names you announced when they're going to be working on their mid-size vehicles. If they make passenger cars now, that's mostly their focus, and they're going to be doing the mid-size trucks or the 4, 5, 6 later. I think GM said 2035, which is quite some time away. They'll probably do it sooner than that, but they say 2035 for some reason. They put out that announcement. So it's really from all the people who are coming to us and that we're talking to and our potential. There's a market for us, right? I wouldn't have made this decision just because I don't have enough money for the B1, B2. That wasn't the reason, right? It was, it's really just the potential there and the timing that they want. So if we start working on pilot programs for 6 or 7 of those fleets for them to have something in their hands this year, that's a lot of work to get to that point, right? So we needed to just put everyone on that because that's what they're asking for. Not sure if that answered your question, but that's.
Well, I was just wondering, I mean, if we hear these, traditional truck names, and then here comes Bollinger, and
right.
Maybe they haven't heard of you, and so what's the secret sauce that makes you special compared to these other guys that have, we've been around for 100 years, and we have a bulldog on the front of our vehicle, and we're tough,
Right. Yeah. Well, a lot of those companies too, if you look at what they've been doing, is that they've been upfitting, right? So they've been working with upfitters to electrify vehicles. That's what they've been concentrating on. A few names that may or may not have been in that list you said have completely outsourced all of their electrification, and they haven't started to do electrification in-house yet. So, a number of people who have, something out there electrified, it's nothing close to production or anything that they actually do themselves. So people are all different levels here, and of course, if you're across many platforms, there's a lot of players who started out in class 8 who are thinking about coming down into 7, right? There's a company here in Michigan that's doing vans in class 1 that thinks it might go into class 3, but it's concentrated in class 1 right now. So it's really where their efforts, where are they looking? The companies that are making billions of dollars and selling diesel trucks now and using that money to move forward, good for them. They got the income and the source for it. So yeah, we've always been a small player in a little fighting group over here. And again, the entire reason we're moving to commercial is because of who's talking to us and what they want from us. So that's what we're going with. So.
I'm curious what this means for the Bollinger name. We mentioned different names in the field. Would it be something like, electrified or chassis brought to you by Bollinger with a different type of name?
Right.
How do you market your company?
Right now, like on our website at the top, you'll see it's powered by Bollinger Motors. So that's kind of the thinking right now is like all of that development that you didn't really know about, didn't know all the details necessarily about underneath our trucks is what moves forward, right? So powered by Bollinger Motors is how we're positioning ourselves right now.
Robert, one of the things I respect about you is you didn't go do a SPAC. And, all the others did, and they got a bunch of money. A lot of them are getting hammered in the market right now, too. And of course, if you go public, you probably don't have the kind of control over the company that you do right now. But I mean, there's a lot of money, or certainly was a lot of money sitting out there. Why did you not go that route? Yeah.
I mean, the good side about going SPAC is even if you're hammered by critics or hammered in the stock, who cares? You got $200, $400, $500 million to move forward. So no matter what, anyone who got a lot of money last year in the SPAC, they got a lot of money. So there's nothing to be, Automotive takes an insane amount of money, as you know, and a lot of them got it. So they are moving along with it. So, we were, I know we had talked to a couple back in the day. I know that right when, people were coming to us talking about SPAC was right when other companies were getting into trouble with some of the things that they might have said or perception or however you want to put it. And so it was kind of like a let's wait until we have all our ducks in a row, before we open up the books to everything, like that kind of thing. We've always been honest. I've been the major funder for the company, right? I funded it up until about a year ago. So, and then we have other investors, but so we've always been honest about everything. And I think that we just weren't ready back when it was the big thing. And it's kind of quieted off. A lot of the SPACs have moved on to battery and infrastructure kind of deals, which is fine. We've always been lean and mean, so we've been able to continue developing on less than SPAC size investments. But we're always raising. We're a startup still, so.
Yeah, well, look, from my vantage point, it added a lot more credibility because it clearly showed you weren't just out trying to grab whatever money that you could get.
Right. Yeah.
Is that sort of the long-term play to be almost this like boutique, if you will, like commercial and then perhaps luxury type of, vehicle maker? Or maybe do you have bigger goals on your horizon?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Back to your point about luxury, I forgot to comment on that. Yeah, back when we priced our truck and it was 6 figures, that's a luxury price point. I agree. And we would always say, all of our development, all of our money and all of that cost, that final price point for the vehicle was in the luxury of the capability of the truck, right? So we didn't have creature comforts, in the truck. That's not where we made it luxurious. It was luxurious in the fact that you could go anywhere with this truck, right? You could go through 36 inches of water. You could raise it up to 20 inches and go over boulders. You could, all that kind of stuff. So, the luxury was what you could do with the truck. And I think that high capability is where we always want to stay. So it's the power behind electric and what you can do with electric. So that those, crazy badass trucks we made, we want that kind of thinking to continue into what we put underneath commercial trucks, right? Because the biggest thing for them is uptime, 10-year lifespan, a lot of these vehicles being bought for home delivery weren't made to be used that much, right? So they're paying the price and they're showing it. So to make a long-lasting truck that uses tried and true industry standards for commercial and then marries them with the high technology of electric and using our battery packs that we've developed in-house so that you have no downtime. That's our main goal. So it's the strength in that is really what that fleets are looking for. So that's where we're putting all our concentration now.
Robert, let me ask you.
So it's still capability, right? We've always been about capability. It's still going to be about capability.
Robert, let me ask you to pull back from your company and to look at the landscape as you see it now in the industry. What's your sense of what's happening and where it's going?
Well, a big part of us choosing this path was the idea that a lot of fleets, want to go green. Either they want to go green and do right by the planet, or they want to look like they're doing right and go green and by the planet. Right there's a lot of pressure for all fleets to go green, and there's going to be a lot of, I believe, more and more regulations to make them go green. So I think that's where a big, huge opportunity for the whole country, for the whole world. We have, on our website now, just, some stats about, like, even if you just electrify 5% of the commercial fleet, how much CO2 comes out of the air. So the opportunity for a company to continue to grow and make an impact is much greater in the fleet side. So I've never really pushed the green side of our company, right? It was always about cool trucks. And I wanted to sell people on, you want this truck because of what it can do, right? And the way it gets there is part of it. And you can plug in 20 different tools and run all your tools off of it and go up the top of the mountain and build your love shack and all that kind of stuff. So it had all these capabilities because of it was electric. But it's like, don't buy it just because it's electric, right? But now we're going to be pushing that, the idea there of how green you can be. I was with an organic hair care company. I had a grass-fed cattle farm. It's always been about the bigger picture of how, like, all these things add up to give people cancer. All these things add up to pollute and make people sick and all that kind of stuff. So that greater impact there has always been dear to my heart. We kept it off the branding so much because it wasn't about preaching and pointing fingers and like, oh, you have to go electric. It was like, you want to go electric when you have a truck that's this effing cool, right? So and so that was always, that's more emotional, that's more guttural. Like, we want, make people want to come over to your vehicle, not force it on them. So anyway, I'm going off target here with your question, but yeah, it's how I see the market going forward is definitely the fleet side. The commercial side is going to go electric, have a much higher percentage of electric far sooner than the consumer side. Great things like Ford having a Ford F-150 electric at a great price point is going to do wonders for them. That's exactly what they should have done. It looks almost exactly like the Ford F-150. That's exactly what they should be doing. That's exactly what I knew they were going to do. That's why I made my truck different. So, but yeah, I see the world changing for electric much more on the commercial side first, and then it'll go from there. So,
Robert, I think that's probably the perfect note to wrap up this part of the conversation of the show on. Right. Really cool to see what you're doing. True entrepreneur. You had these plans. The market spoke. You pivoted. You got a new way of going. And so we'll have to have you back in another year or so. Get an update on how things stand. But thanks so much for making the time available and coming on here today.
Thanks so much for talking to me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Robert.
Good deal. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. We got other things to talk about that's going on in the automotive industry. And we are back.
Indeed we are. So I guess it was before the show, you were mentioning, John, the excitement of the Tesla report that came out yesterday.
Well, I mean,
what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the Tesla earnings were unbelievable. You know, here the whole auto industry is like, oh, woe is us. We can't get enough chips. Our production is crippled, and they grow production and sales by 70%. Their profitability is really, really impressive. And, you know, other things that are going on, you know, this whole Optimus robot thing that he's talking about changing society on, Elon's talking about it. And I mean, I was just blown away by the numbers and the other things they presented.
But there's no Cybertruck coming this year. There's no semi-truck coming this year. There's no Roadster coming this year. Come on.
Yeah, that's right. So look, I ran into the guys from Voltaic at CES. They're real battery experts, battery design, battery testing, and all that stuff. And what they said is, look, you know, as good as Tesla is, they don't have enough batteries. They can't make these things. Now, that's an outsider's point of view that I want to share. But what Elon said is, look, we're capacity constrained. We could come out with more new models right now, like the Cybertruck, the Semi, whatever, but it's not going to increase sales. And it's going to take an enormous amount of engineering and effort and time and money, and it's not going to increase sales. So, you know, his whole argument is we're just going to focus on what we've got. I think probably from one of those extremes, they can't get enough batteries to, hey, this makes sense not to bring them out right now. Somewhere in between there is the truth. And maybe both polar opposites are explaining the truth.
I'm a little worried about the Cybertruck. I mean, aren't you guys? I mean, it seems like it's always a year away. And I mean, when is that year going to get here? And, you know, I don't know. I mean, General Motors and Ford, in my opinion, really stepped up in the last probably 18 months with their electric truck plans, not just with like Chevy, but with Hummer, and of course the Lightning. And it's like, hey, if you can go to a dealer and get a Lightning, maybe you don't wait around for the Cybertruck. I think they're going to lose perhaps some of that middle ground. And then, of course, the Tesla, like, you know, really hardcore enthusiasts will, of course, wait till whenever the Cybertruck gets there. But I think that's a priority. It's a truck. You know,
Greg, that's an awesome point. By delaying this, he's letting the competition catch up.
All right, yeah. But isn't this a situation, Greg, that, you know, there are people who buy Apple computers and Apple, you know, that's it. And it doesn't matter what the specs are for a Dell. It just doesn't matter. And so the Cybertruck person's going to say, and not just Tesla fanboys, but people who are like, you know, holy crap, that looks like, you know, Sid Mead designed it. That looks great. You know, I want to have one of those. And so he doesn't give anything up.
So I was one of those people. I never had anything but an iPhone or a MacBook until I broke my iPhone like right before the pandemic. And I got this screaming deal on this Google Pixel. And I'm like, well, hey, it's here. I need a phone. The Apple Store was closed until at that point. So I'm going to go with that. So I sort of feel like there's, you know, you're absolutely right, Gary. There's always going to be the people who are like, hey, it's Tesla or nothing. But I do think you're going to lose a lot of potential middle ground customers who say, well, wait a minute, the Lightning is $40,000 and I can go get it right now. And wait, I could get like an incentive or something on my taxes, and Consumers is going to give me like $800 to install a charger. Well, I'm going to take that deal. You know, I mean, life is kind of about showing up, right? And, you know, right now Tesla's not showing up and they're letting other people kind of, I think, eat their lunch a little bit.
So speaking of Tesla, since
we're speaking of Tesla,
it's interesting to speak about. So the J.D. Power Electrical Vehicle Experience Ownership Study came out, just came out, and lo and behold, in the luxury segment, it was Model 3 at the top, followed by Model Y, followed by Model S, and then you go way down, and it's the Audi e-tron. And I thought it was interesting. So, you know, I looked into what the metrics were for this. And so these are real people who are, you know, involved in this. And, you know, the accuracy of the stated battery range is one thing that they measured, you know, so they're saying, okay, we've got a battery range of whatever, and how accurate that was in reality. The availability of public charging, the real battery range, not just the stated, but the real battery range, the cost of ownership, driving enjoyment, ease of home charging, internal and exterior styling, safety and tech features, service experience, vehicle quality, and reliability. Okay. And it was very interesting to me that one of the things that Tesla really scored high on, and this goes back to a show we had a couple, 3 weeks ago about dealerships, one of the things that new EV owners rated them highly on was the service experience. So, it almost seems to me that, Tesla's got it all going now. I mean, I was highly skeptical of them a few years ago. I just thought that this was nothing, but I mean, they're crushing this. I mean, Model 3, 777 points on a 1,000-point scale. Audi, 718. I mean, and the service experience. So it just isn't from your local dealer. It's from your Tesla store.
Yeah. One thing I would ask is, JD Power does the initial quality survey that looks at a car after 3 months of ownership. Then it does its vehicle dependability survey after 3 years of ownership. And, I've always said the IQS, the initial quality, well, of course, every car should work for 3 months. I didn't see a whole lot of value in that. So do you know, Gary, is this like a 3-month ownership or a 3-year ownership?
It would have to be less than 3 years, because in the category of cars that the rest of us can afford, which includes the Kia Niro, the Mustang Mach-E, Leaf, Kona, ID4, and Bolt. Some of those vehicles haven't been around for 3 years, so it would be less than 3 years.
I thought it was interesting in the study that some of the areas that consumers did find like dissatisfaction with was squeaks and rattles, the infotainment, and then some of the exterior design elements. So, I don't know. To me, that almost makes me think that like some EV buyers don't totally look at their vehicles with like amber colored glasses. They understand if, hey, like a mouse could fit through the door hinges or something, or, like the ID4, for example, the Volkswagen ID4, I thought had a rather dense infotainment system. So I think some of those things are showing up in these studies. And I think that's actually, that's a good thing. I think that's sort of making people realize, hey, they're looking at this as a consumer good and, warts and all.
Yeah, but the point you're making here, Gary, is really important, because out in the webosphere, there's all kinds of stories about horrifically bad experiences with Tesla service. Maybe those are outliers that have gotten blown out of proportion. Maybe JD Power's got this right, and there isn't a problem with service.
And, I thought that there were a couple of interesting quotes that came out of yesterday's Tesla presentation. One is, FSD software remains one of our primary areas of focus. That's interesting. Their full self-driving is one of their primary areas of focus. And the other one is, manufacturing is Tesla's core competency. Now, goodness knows that, they're getting over 600,000 units out of the Fremont plant. And, that's no small feat. Good for them on that. And Shanghai is, 400,000 units. So here's a company with 1 million unit capacity already. And that isn't even including the Austin plant nor the plant in Berlin. It's like, yeah, this is a real car company.
Oh, most definitely. I think they did $53 billion in revenue last year. That's a real number. That's definitely a real number. And that's what I've said on the show before. 2022 is the year that Tesla will outsell Subaru, Mazda, I think even Mitsubishi. And by the end of this year, when Berlin and Austin are up and running at their line rates, Tesla will be at a run rate. It won't match BMW, but it will be at a run rate to match BMW going into 2023 in global sales.
Well, Cox Automotive came out and said that they believe that in the United States, Tesla actually outsold BMW. Cox estimates that they sold 352,471 units versus BMW's 336,644 units. So this was a lot of figuring that they had to do, because Tesla doesn't break out its sales of the US and everywhere else. But So if they outsold BMW, and BMW heretofore was the #1 luxury brand in the United States, that's really saying something.
It absolutely is.
I think there was a John Z. DeLorean quote to the effect of something like, if we do everything perfect, maybe we could be BMW after like a generation or two. And I think, that's where you really have to give Elon Musk credit and Tesla credit for achieving so much scale in half a generation. They've been around since 2007, 2006. I mean, that's incredible growth in 15, 16 years.
Yeah. And really, you could even argue that it's been a decade only, because that's when the Model S first came out, was about a decade ago.
Yeah, I don't think the Roadster gave them too much scale, as much as it was a very fun car to drive. I mean, who doesn't want to drive an electric Lotus, right?
Right. Yeah, nothing like an Elise, which is no longer in production. So, of course, neither is that Roadster. But
that's true. That's another one that's coming up, maybe right after the Cybertruck.
The new Roadster. That's right.
Yeah, we'll hang on to that. So John, you seem somewhat skeptical about the chip shortage. Now, the Department of Commerce just came out with their study of risks in the semiconductor supply chain, saying that in 2019 there was a 40-day supply of chips. Now there is a 5-day supply of chips, and they're finding that the demand is 17% higher in 2021 than it was in 2019. So there are more people demanding chips, less availability of chips, and that apparently the fabs that are running right now are running at a 90% capacity or greater. And as you know, factories don't like to run at 90% capacity or greater. They actually want something lower than that, so they're able to keep the machines running. So what's your take on chips?
Looks like it's getting worse, not better. Now was supposed to be when everything was starting to ease. Commerce Department comes out and says there's only a 5-day supply. New York Times has an article about how China and the United States could get into war over chips, which comes back to Taiwan, the largest single source of this. And that same study showed too that what they call legacy chips, the old tech chips that automakers love to use because they're cheap, are in the tightest supply of all. So, and we all know that chip makers, if they're building new fab plants, they're not going to build brand new fab plants that cost $10 billion a piece to make old technology chips. And the reason the automakers want to use those old chips, by the way, too, is not just because they're cheap. They're completely validated. They've been shaken and frozen and heated up, and all the torture tests that they put through them to qualify for what they call automotive grade. And this is not well understood outside of the auto industry, but you've got cars out there that are 10 years old, 15 years old, 20 years old. Chips are still good. When was the last time you had a phone, a laptop, or a desktop that lasted more than 3 years? I mean, after that, you're getting rid of it. Why? Because everything starts to degrade because it's not built to automotive standards. And yet those automotive grade chips that the auto industry wants to use because they're so robust is not what the chip makers want to put into their new plants. And that's why I think Senator Gary Peters from Michigan is trying to get a carve out in the CHIPS Act specifically for those legacy chips to continue to go into production, make some money available so it will be economically viable for the chip companies to make them.
I think the chip shortage is, between the last couple of years, it's been a theme almost with the pandemic. It seems like the pandemic in the summer, everything's okay. And then it's like in the fall, everybody gets a little sick. And then it gets even worse in January and February. And then hopefully in the spring, it gets a little bit better. And it sort of feels like that's how the chip shortage has been ebbing and flowing. I guess we'll see. I mean, to tie those together directly, I mean, you do see like worker shortages, supply constraints. I mean, that is clearly a problem for it. But it's really interesting when you start to see like, the government and different, geopolitical forces kind of really weigh in and try to drill down on like the different sizes of the chips. And you start to wonder, well, do these guys know what they're talking about? How do you want to regulate this? So to me, this seems like a problem. It's going to be going on for maybe a couple of years. We'll see. I don't have
Greg,
a
that's
crystal
such a
ball,
good
though.
point, because one of the other things that came out of that Commerce Department report was that if there's another COVID outbreak in Malaysia, which is another big source of chips too, it could shut down manufacturing in America.
I mean, let's hope that doesn't happen, right? I mean, that would really,
Right.
I mean, I think the other thing too is it shows just how interconnected the global economy is right now. I mean, we've been seeing this since March 2020 when all these different supply chain things hit, and I think to go back to Elon, I mean, he was talking about how microchips are like the toilet paper, when everybody was hoarding toilet paper and couldn't get it. And, now it maybe isn't as much of a problem. At least I hope it's not. I think maybe you'll see things ease up a little bit with microchips. So we'll see.
Yeah.
John, you'll remember this former Reagan administration economic advisor, Michael Boskin. Microchips, potato chips, what's the difference? So moving on from there. So General Motors had a huge announcement this week with Mary Barra going to Lansing and basically saying, hey, we're going to make the biggest investment we've ever made in the history of General Motors. Nearly $7 billion into electric vehicle capacity. What do you guys think about that?
Go ahead, Greg.
I mean, I think it really is, it shows leadership in some ways, when General Motors does something, even though they were passed in the United States by Toyota in the fourth quarter there for total sales. I think when people think of a symbol of industrial might in the United States, it's still General Motors. So I think when you see that kind of investment, it really shows that they want to be leaders in the segment. I think it shows they're willing to not just try to build the vehicles, but also control the narrative and the messaging and sort of maybe even transcend the car industry, which I think that's something Mary Barra has been quite good at. I think she's been an excellent spokesperson for the industry and for certain elements in ways like electrification that some of the other CEOs, haven't. They haven't even tried to. So I think she's really articulated a vision. They have big plans, for the next 10 years. General Motors is, I mean, they're going to really plug in, to use a bad cliche. And I think it's going to be interesting, especially for like some of the brands like Cadillac, how they can just monetize this technology perhaps better than Chevy will initially. I just saw a Lyric the other day driving around Troy. Couldn't believe it, actually. But then I came back and saw, oh, hey, it's actually the pre-pros already out there. So I think that's where you're going to really see GM sort of maybe flex a little bit, show what they could do in the next decade as far as mobilizing all of these resources and going all in. I mean, $7 billion, that's literally putting all of your chips in the middle of the table and saying, come and get us. So, I think it's actually a strong move for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. I think General Motors is out in front of all the legacy automakers when it comes to electric cars and trucks. That's not the perception. The perception is, oh, they're trying to catch up to Ford right now. They just made this $7 billion announcement in Michigan. Ford already announced $11.5 billion in Blue Oval City in Memphis, Tennessee, and GM only sold whatever it was, 28 electric cars last year because of the whole Bolt thing. And that's the public perception that GM doesn't know what it's doing. I believe their strategy has put them at least 2 years ahead of Ford, maybe 3 years ahead of Ford. I believe it has committed more than even Volkswagen has, not on a dollar amount or a euro amount, but in terms of saying we're not going to do a modified architecture using our ICE architecture. We're going full bore, clean sheet. We're going dedicated to EV plants. And I think the 7 billion thing was, look, they decided that back in 2018 or 2019. We're just starting to see their strategy roll out right now. And my prediction is by 2024, the public's going to go, how did GM get to be number one? How did they catch up so fast? Whereas I believe right now they're actually in front of everybody else. Of the legacies, not the startups.
All right. So I want to follow up on something that you said, Greg, when you, and this is very good observation about General Motors basically saying, okay, we're going to push these chips into the center of the table. I mean, and so today, another legacy brand, the Renault, Nissan, Mitsubishi alliance came out and said, we're going to spend $26 billion within the next 5 years and come out with 35 EVs on 5 platforms. And John, you mentioned the $11 billion that Ford is investing in Blue Oval City. And so here's my question. I mean, we're talking billions and billions and billions of dollars here. Okay. Where does the return on investment come from?
Well, I think for General Motors, it's pretty clear, and you're already seeing some of that, is with Ultium. They have sort of like the one like platform, battery cell, just architecture and component system that seems to be fully integrated. It seems like it's going to work. And to me, that's what cuts through the clutter. You know, I think Ford, I'm sure, has something they're working on. I don't think it's been quite articulated as well. But with GM, they just cut right through the clutter. They have this like battery tech that sounds like it's a transformer, and away you go. And I think they have a pretty, strong hand to play with that. Otherwise, I mean, to your point, Gary, yeah, I mean, it's like 26 billion here, 11 billion here, 7 billion there. It does all start to blur together. As someone who's very interested in electric vehicles, I think it's encouraging and interesting to see what the Renault Alliance does, because, I mean, over here, Renault, okay, cool. But over there, they are, a very large player, especially in Western Europe. They add scale, and when they do something, it's a little bit like when GM does something over here. So I'll be interested to see how it plays out over there.
But Gary, yeah, your question's a really good one. I look, in the short term, financial disaster, right? I mean, this is an industry that needs scale. So GM will get a good return, I believe, if it's able to fill up the Hamtramck plant, if it's what they call, what is it? Plant zero or whatever. Factory zero. Now they're converting Orion. They're going to do Spring Hill. They got a plant in Mexico. They've got one in Canada. If those are operating at full capacity or near full capacity, making roughly 240,000 vehicles a year, they're going to make money. And the key thing, and this is why I believe GM is in front, this Ultium platform can build you can flex it for anything from a compact vehicle to a full-size SUV. It doesn't matter. The guts of the vehicle are essentially the same. You just change the width, you change the length, you drop whatever top hat you want on it. So, listen to what, Nicole Kratz said last week. They took so much time out of their product development. One of the reasons why is once that Ultium platform is done, I mean, so much heavy lifting in the product development process has been accomplished. And going forward, as GM builds everything off this platform, it's going to save a ton of money. I mean, it's going to be way cheaper, not including the batteries, to make these EVs than it did the ICE vehicles.
But I mean, I just look at it from the point of view of, okay, are we convinced the consumer wants to buy these? Or is the consumer going to be standoffish and really not go all in the same way, as, back to Greg's analogy, car companies going all in, pushing a bunch of chips on the table there. And I was reading a thing on GeekWare, which is a tech newsletter that comes out of Seattle. And they had a piece last week which indicated that in Washington State, very green, right? There are 62,950 full EVs are registered in the state. 62,950. Number one, of course, is Tesla. Guess what's number two and how far down it is? It's the Nissan Leaf.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's 36,000 for Tesla, 12,000 for the Leaf. And then it goes down from there. So, I mean, in a place like that, you'd think that everybody and his brother would have an EV of some sort or other, that they'd be rolling around in, the Honda EVs from way back in the day that that they keep going. But I'm just concerned that the OEMs are going to say, uh-oh, and they're going to have to raise prices. And when they raise prices, that will decrease demand. And when they decrease the demand, there goes it's going to be a vicious circle.
There was a quote, I think, in Automotive News Europe and maybe some other places where Carlos Tavares said something to the effect of electric vehicles are what politicians are choosing, maybe not consumers. And I don't know if I agree with that. I can kind of see it from both sides, but you are seeing some pushback from like Tavares, a little bit from Akio Toyota, although we've seen their electric plans in the last few weeks, and they definitely are going to bring the goods as well. So I think there's some consternation on the part of the industry too, right? Like, I don't think they like being sort of told what to do. I mean, who does? So I think you're going to see that, at least from the industry side of things. Consumers, I mean, to me, it's going to be an infrastructure thing too. Like if there's a charger on your corner, or you could get one that's cheap and it works, and you just plug it in. Like I just plugged in my laptop because it was starting to die. I mean, you can do that to your car. Sure, it's not a problem.
Yeah, well, look, even though Tesla has been around for a decade and doing great, and all these other investments are coming for EVs, it's still very early days. And we're not going to see a tipping point in the next couple of years where all of a sudden the public goes, yep, it's EV or nothing. That's all I'm going. And so what we're seeing right now is the market is segmented. And you've got the early adopters. They're already in. They've got an EV. Then you have this next section of people or segment of people who really do want an EV, but what they want isn't out there yet. They want a pickup truck, or they want a full-size SUV. Maybe they want a specific brand. Maybe they want to deal with a dealer that is nearby them. Tesla, remember, is still limited. It cannot even legally sell cars in the state of Texas, where it put in the big gigafactory. It's illegal for it to sell direct there. In the state of Michigan, they're limited to one store so far, a state of 10 million people. I'll bet they're limited in the state of Washington too. So all I'm saying is we're going to see this segment grow. It's already the fastest growing segment in the market right now. And once you start getting more models out there from more brands, you're going to instantly see it grow from roughly 3% of the market to almost 20%. And then you're going to have
when's 20% happening? When's this 20%? I want this tape to be marked.
Okay. Yeah. Now that's fair. I'll say 2025. Wow. 2025, 2026. Bold statement that will get to roughly 20%. My own belief is by 2030, it's not going to grow that significantly much more. It'll grow, my opinion, roughly 30%. I'm saying 1 out of 3 vehicles sold in 2020 will be electric. I'm talking US market, not global. And then why do I say that? Because you got the early adopters, you got the next chunk of people that really want an EV, but what they want isn't in the market yet. Then you got another chunk of people who are like, I'll get an EV, but I'm going to wait till they're everywhere. I'm going to wait till there's a lot of charging stations. And then once you get beyond that, that's where you got the problem. That's where you get into people who are like, I don't want an electric car. And then you got a significant subset of them who think electric cars are stupid. They don't believe in global climate change. They don't think that this is necessary. They feel like the government's shoving EVs down their throat. That cohort of people who are very skeptical or even anti-EV may represent 40% of the car buying public. So that's a huge chunk that, they're not going to buy one in this decade. Not at all. Not at all. But so when you say, Gary, when's this all going to happen? It's going to be a gradual move. It's not going to be, flick a switch and 80% of the market goes electric.
So, Greg, you're our guest. I'll give you the last word. Explain to us why John is insane.
I didn't hear that last part. Why he's insane? Oh, well, geez. I do think that's an aggressive timeline, John. I would say maybe like 27. Give us 5 years, a little bit of breathing room. If I were going to put, it feels like we've had an undercurrent of gambling themes on the show. So I would maybe put my money more on 27. That's how I would play.
Okay, that's fair. That could be it. It could be 28.
All right. So what percentage, Greg, do you think will be EVs in 27?
I would go with like what John said. You said 20%, right? Or 30%.
Yeah.
I think that's reasonable. I mean, I think you're going to, again, it's a really good meta here. I mean, depending on how things go politically, depending on how things go with the pandemic, it could be more, it could be less. But I think that's a pretty like spot on number. I would agree with you, John, because I think you are going to see some untapped demand, people who are sort of almost like they realize it's out there. They realize that there's some pretty good incentives out there right now if you want to get yourself into an EV and you could get your hands on one, and you're going to sort of meet that demand like where it's at. And then it is like the 40% of people who maybe will never buy an EV under any circumstances. That's 2040, 2050, 20 never, who knows?
Right. All right. So, okay. I'm going to say this. I think Robert Bollinger was correct. I think we're going to see this in commercial before we're going to see this in consumer. Yep. I think consumers are going to be not as aggressive in terms of this purchase. I think that the infrastructure situation is not being addressed in a way that it needs to be. And Tesla, by the way, when they did their announcement yesterday, they talked about how the number of superchargers has increased. That is good for them. That's not good for everybody else that seemed to be lagging on this. So I think both of you guys are moderately insane. It is not going to be that big a number.
I've been called far worse, so that's okay with me.
That's great. Well, Greg, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
And Gary, let's do it again next week.
Will do. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it very much.
And thanks to all those of you who have tuned in.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.
Visit our website, Autoline.tv, where you can watch us live Thursday afternoons. Get your daily fix with Autoline Daily and in-depth analysis and interviews with Autoline This Week. There's all that and much more at Autoline.tv.